Books are such a powerful form of media, and Bonnie and I love to read books for their stories, wisdom, and for empowerment. We wanted to share 2 books that impacted our lives that talk about finding your voice. Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury is a classic, but it was only a few years ago that I read this book. I was so amazed by this book on several levels. The imagery in the writing of this book is so beautiful and brings this world to life. There were several times where I was reading it and I had to stop and reread a sentence because it was so beautifully written, or it just drew such a picture that I needed to sit in the world that it brought me into. One of these lines was near the beginning of the book while we were getting a description of what the main character does. It says, "He wanted above all, like the old joke, to shove a marshmallow on a stick in the furnace while the flapping pigeon-winged books died on the porch and the lawn of the house." And this word picture made me stop and watch those pigeon-winged books die in my mind. Honestly, this book paints such a bleak picture of life, and specifically a life without books, but not really just books. It's a life devoid of imagination, detail, beauty, healing, wisdom, and differing perspectives, and that void specifically being there because of the books being banned. In the introduction to the book, Neil Gaiman says, "Fiction is a lie that tells us true things over and over." And this is the journey of the main character, his waking up to find his voice. It started with the simple questions of a bold, curious person. This made him start questioning the status quo around him and realizing that what he always thought was right might not be. This quote shows that journey beginning. She seemed to remember something and came back to look at him with wonder and curiosity. "Are you happy?" she said. "Am I what?" he cried. But she was gone, running in the moonlight. Her front door shut gently. He was not happy. He was not happy. He said the words to himself. He realized this as the true state of affairs. He wore his happiness like a mask, and the girl had run off across the lawn with the mask, and there was no way of going back to knock on her door and ask for it back. Throughout the rest of the book, he completely changes his perspectives and begins to take action despite the consequences, knowing that how this world was operating is not okay. And while the story might not end with some amazing transformation of the world he lives in, his transformation and the actions he takes to try to change that world are what I think ultimately matters. If you haven't read Fahrenheit 451, I highly recommend it because it's just beautifully written, but also for me, I felt like it made me take a look at my life and ask me where I was using my voice and how I was standing up for the things that need to be stood up for.
I first discovered this book series when I was about 12 years old, and I loved it from the very beginning, and I've read it through at least 3 times now, and that is the Emily of New Moon series by L.M. Montgomery. Most people know her Anne of Green Gables series, but I find far fewer people know the Emily of New Moon series. But it's so cool to me that in L.M. Montgomery's journals, she said that Emily of New Moon was the best book I have ever written. I have had more pleasure writing it than any of the others, not even accepting Anne of Green Gables. So it's also the author's favorite as well. There are 3 books in the series, all featuring Emily Bird Starr, and I just adore her. These books resonated with me in so many different ways. First of all, Emily is a writer and she loves words, which I could relate to, but she also just has such a deep grasp on deep things. She sees beauty and wonder in everything. In my opinion, she shares some of these characteristics with Anne Shirley from Anne of Green Gables, but I find her to be a little less flighty, and I prefer Emily's deep internal world and the soulful way that she views things and describes things. I also love how Emily knows the whole way through who she is. She has a firm connection to her heritage, and it is so important to her to honor and respect her family. And she also knows who she is as a person. She has such a gift as a writer, and most of the people in her life can't see that, and they actually try to actively discourage her from using her gift and using her talent. She does have some bumps along the way as she learns how to use her voice and how to use it kindly and respectfully, but she also has clear boundaries that she sets for herself even as a young girl. There's one part where a character tells her that she should just be thankful to get a home anywhere and that she's not of much importance, and Emily's response is to say, "I am important to myself." Emily is courageous, she is driven, she is fierce, she believes in herself, she believes in her abilities, she's highly imaginative, and she loves language and beauty. There are various points throughout the books where she kind of has to fight for her perspective and her voice to be seen and heard. In the second book, Emily Climbs, the author writes, I have never pretended, nor ever will pretend, that Emily was a proper child. Books are not written about proper children. They are so dull nobody would read them. I find these books to be far from dull. The books cover her life, her growth, her friendships, her love interests, and they cover so many great themes like identity, family dynamics, how to deal with toxic relationships, respect, all sorts of topics that are so good to think about and that I really appreciated as a young girl and also now as an adult. I think at the end of the day, A, I'm really jealous of her writing ability. Both L.M. Montgomery's writing ability and Emily Bird Starr's writing ability. And B, I love Emily because I do feel like she is very similar to me in a lot of ways. And I just admire the way that she's able to set boundaries and that she's so self-aware. I hope that I can be half as amazing as Emily Bird Starr.
Like the old joke, Books are such a powerful form. Let me start that again as I stutter immediately. Piece of paper and a pen. If you haven't read Fahrenheit 451,
Years old, and I had